3.4 Karma and Samsara. Buddhists believe in karma similar to Hinduism. The word karma comes from the Sanskrit word kur, which means to act. Karma is also a Sanskrit word having to do with action. And in the context of Buddhism, it refers to the teaching that people's actions lead to consequences or results in what they experience. Basically, the word phala, which literally means fruit, is used to refer to the consequences of karma. One thing about karma is that the Buddha is quite clear in interpreting it not as the literal external or physical action that you do. Rather, what is influencing your future or current experience are the inner intentions behind your deeds. The three types of karma are thoughts, words, and deeds, or physical actions. However, the part that actually has a causal influence on your experience is the intention behind these various actions. So if you perform a deed or physical action that ends up, say, causing harm or failing to help someone, but your intention was to help, then the intention is what is going to determine your future consequence. This is different from Jainism, where the actual action is what the karma is. So one example that can be used to distinguish the two doctrines is that in Jainism, if you accidentally kill an animal, then it's still bad karma. In Buddhism, you do have a duty, you might say, to try to avoid harm. If you kill an animal and aren't aware of it, but you're being very reckless and careless, like maybe you're driving down a street and not paying attention, not even bothering or caring if there's any animals that you may hit, that could still be bad karma, but it's still less bad than when you deliberately or intentionally kill or harm something. So the idea is it's the quality of your intention that matters in Buddhism with respect to karma. Now, the thing that makes karma a bit complicated is that the fruit or consequence of the action can be experienced at three different time frames. So you can get fruit of an action right when it's being performed. It can also happen later in the same lifetime or in a future life. And this partially explains why, according to the Buddha, most beings are ignorant about karma, because they cannot see the big picture, the different scales upon which it operates. Also, it can be hard to notice, unless you pay very careful attention, that some of the things you're experiencing right now are being caused by your present karma. So a few implications of the Buddhist view of karma. One is that it actually contradicts the view called annihilationism that he rejects. One of the versions of annihilationism says that sentient beings or conscious beings don't really exist because they are just collections of elements. Another view is that the Buddha, though, says that sentient beings are real. They're the beings that are the authors of karma. So in other words, in order to understand karma, it depends upon the reality of there being sentient beings. So this is part of the reason why the Buddha rejects annihilationism, is because he thinks it conflicts with karma, which he regards as a really important belief. It's kind of like the basis or the beginning of the religious life according to Buddhism, because you have to believe in the principle of cause and effect in order to kind of have an incentive or a motivation to changing your karma, to improving your circumstances. A second implication is that the Buddha does believe in free will. So basically, there are some misinterpretations of karma saying that you can't control anything that happens to you because it's going to be caused inevitably by your past karma. But that ignores the Buddhist view that you have the present ability to act. So karma is not just about experiencing the results of your past actions. It's the power of action. So you have the power to influence both your current and your future experience based on your current action. So it's supposed to be a kind of empowering doctrine, not one that says you cannot avoid your fate. And then thirdly, there is a kind of necessary relationship though. It's between your actions and the consequences. So a given act or karma will lead to some consequence. The reason why though it's not a strict one-to-one or obvious cause-effect relationship is because your future karma can also influence how those consequences are experienced. So for example, if you murdered someone, then you're going to experience some consequence for that. But your future karma, as well as your past karma, will influence that. An example taken from the Pali Canon, there was a mass murderer who actually became a student, a follower of the Buddha. He became a monk. And he had a lot of bad karma from his past because of all the people he had killed. And he kind of partially reaped the rewards of that bad karma because he would go to beg for food in a village, and the villagers would shout at him, they would throw stones at him. He came back to the Buddha all bloodied and beaten, and the Buddha told him, actually, you're lucky because you would have suffered a lot worse fate if you hadn't been doing good karma right now as a Buddhist monk. So there's this idea that you don't escape the consequences of any of your actions. You're always going to experience the result of that karma. But because you're still doing new actions now, you can actually continue to shape how that past bad karma will manifest. So there's also a doctrine known as dependent origination, which is a translation of the Sanskrit pratitya samutpada. And this is a more detailed theory of how karma works itself out in your experience. So it illustrates some of the complexity the Buddha believed exists with regards to karma and its consequences. Now, this is explained in a wheel or a chain that has 12 different links or steps to it. And this is illustrated graphically by the Bhava Chakra, or the wheel of being or becoming. The outer ring of this wheel is the one that corresponds to the 12 steps of dependent origination. The innermost circle of the wheel represents the 3 defilements, which are types of craving. The second circle with the black and white halves shows how these defilements can manifest as good or bad karma. The good karma, when you avoid the defilements, helps uplift you to a higher level of being. The bad karma takes you down to a lower level of being. The third circle is the 6 realms of rebirth. Buddhists actually believe in many different possible worlds, dimensions, or realms that you can be reborn in. But these are the 6 main kinds. So the one up top, for example, is a heavenly realm. The one down below is a hell realm, which is maximum pain and suffering, whereas the heavenly realm would be maximum pleasure and happiness. Heaven, though, is not eternal within the Buddhist perspective. It will not last forever. You get to heaven based on good karma, but eventually the fruits of your past good karma will come to an end, and then you'll have a new rebirth in samsara. The only way to get out of samsara is by basically purifying yourself so much you no longer produce even good karma. You could think of the most pure types of intentions, like pure goodwill, as kind of transcending the circle of karma. The outermost ring, though, is the one related to dependent origination. These are symbolic representations of the 12 steps. The first step on the wheel of dependent origination is ignorance. This is symbolized near the top by a blind man. And the blindness here is just a metaphor for not seeing the consequences of your actions. So it's basically an ignorance of the reality of karma and how it operates through cause and effect, that is at the root of this whole sequence. Now, the second step is called formation or samkara. It's symbolized by a craftsman shaping or forming a ceramic vessel. And the idea here is that when you perform action or formation in ignorance, this leads to all the other aspects of your experience. And I don't have time to go through all of these in detail, but it's worth going through them at least briefly to give a sort of general sense of how this sequence is supposed to unfold. So formation conditions consciousness or awareness, which is symbolized by a monkey grasping different branches of a tree. Our consciousness is usually very scattered and unfocused. It hops from one thing to another like a monkey. That's why it has to be trained. Name and form refers to the mind and body. Name is a way of referring to the mental concepts we use in the mind. Form is a way of referring to our perceptions of the body. And the idea here is that what is in our mind and body, according to Buddhism, is actually shaped by our formation, our past karma. And that can also lead to so when you have a mind and body, when you have name and form, then this will itself lead to what are called the sixfold sense bases. This basically means sense perception. It refers to the five senses. The sixth sense is your mind. In Buddhism, this is not referring to a psychic sense per se, but it's a reference to the fact that your mental concepts are shaped by your five physical senses. And what you experience with the senses then are supposed to affect contact. Contact is a technical term referring to what happens when you have a perception of an external object. When that perception comes together with your senses, it can also condition a feeling. Feeling here means pleasant, painful, or neutral feelings. The feelings are the things that we tend to develop cravings around. The cravings lead to clinging, and clinging to experience is what itself conditions becoming, or bhava. That means that your clinging to things are what keep you trapped inside the cycle of becoming, which is samsara. So becoming conditions a future birth, and your birth itself will condition death, because every coming to be or birth within samsara is finite. It's not eternal, and so there will be aging and death associated with it. So the idea is this is kind of an outline of the various aspects of samsara, but the central idea is that what you experience in samsara is conditioned by your karma, and that itself is conditioned by ignorance. Once you gain the fundamental wisdom of awakening, the process of karma and its consequences come to an end. Another thing about this image is the being that is biting on the wheel. That is a depiction of Mara, who's a demonic-like being that tries to keep beings trapped in samsara. Mara himself is a part of samsara, as well as Brahma, or the creator god. So Brahma is a being that creates a given world or universe, but Brahma is not thought of as a supreme god within Buddhism. Brahma is still a part of this process of dependent origination, and so is Mara. Even though Mara, his role is to tempt beings, he himself is suffering in samsara. The only being who's free from dependent origination is the Buddha. You can see floating up there on the upper right, and any other being who's awakened, whether a Buddha or someone called an Arhat who attains awakening by following a Buddha, those beings are the ones who are free from this cycle. So samsara is defined as the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth caused by karma. And the Buddha gives a couple of metaphors for samsara. Well, one is present in the name itself, which literally means wandering or wandering on. And in ancient India, they compared this to the game Chutes and Ladders, or Snakes and Ladders as it's also known, whereby you can kind of randomly hit upon a ladder that allows you to go up, or a snake or chute that causes you to fall down. And most beings, because they're unaware of the law of karma, kind of wander around up and down to different realms of rebirth. They'll have a mix of good and bad karma. They'll be kind of pinballed around to different realms. The Buddha also compares samsara to a flooding river. And this would have been a dangerous thing in ancient India. There is a rainy season that is accompanied by monsoon-like weather, where you have really bad rains. And these lead to rivers flooding, sweeping away people and buildings and animals. So the idea is this is a dangerous river. You don't want to get swept up in the flood of samsara. The idea here is that too, craving can be like an overpowering river, which just sweeps you away in its course. You can see in this image, the Buddha is shown as someone who's giving a light that guides the way for people who want to cross this dangerous river and reach the safe farther shore. So I mentioned the 6 realms of rebirth. This slide shows you images of them in more detail. Realm number 1, the highest realm, is the heavens. This includes many different heavenly realms or worlds. That is the dwelling place of gods and Brahmas, Devas and Brahmas. There's a hierarchy within the heavens themselves. So the highest ones are worlds of form. This is where beings still have bodies, but they are bodies that experience mostly pleasure. So it's a pleasant realm, a pleasant place to dwell. The pure form worlds are even more refined. The beings there don't have perceptible bodies. Instead, they only have these sensations or experiences of pure form, the things you can experience in the dhyanas through meditation normally. The most refined realms are the Brahma worlds. These are realms where you can experience the formless attainments, infinite space, infinite consciousness, nothingness, and neither perception or non-perception. But even these realms are finite in duration. They're not the same as the permanent release of nirvana. The human realm is a medium mix of pleasure and pain. The realm of hungry ghosts is characterized most by greed. These are oftentimes, this state of being is that you can be reborn in after you have some intense thing you're attached to from your previous life. Maybe you didn't get your fill of eating or drinking, for example, or there's something else you're obsessed with you want to feed on metaphorically. The beings in this realm are called pretas, or ghosts. They're symbolized, or they're depicted as having very narrow throats and very large stomachs. So they want to fill their large stomach, but they can't swallow anything through their very narrow neck. So they're constantly suffering because of their intense greed. The hell realm is the worst place to be as far as pain goes. So the beings there are being tortured by demons on account of their past bad karma. The animal realm is characterized by ignorance or delusion. So animals it's harder for them to develop wisdom than other beings. And the 6th realm is called that of the asuras, which is often translated as jealous gods in Buddhism. So these beings, they have greater powers than humans. They're godlike beings, but they're full of anger or hatred, and so they're always fighting with each other.